Good evening, folks. This is Ron Tyler with the Emergency Management Associates.
This is Ron Tyler with the Emergency Management Associates coming to you live from the crossroads of the West in Lake City, Utah. The time right now is 7:05 p.m.
There's been very clear on the backside of the sun, and the earth is located in the sun, hitting the earth is located around 3.5 miles southeast of the earth now. The solar wind is also
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you might be on this planet of ours. Welcome to Emergency Management Associates. We're coming to you from the Area Command, 392 miles west of Kitty Hawk Beach, North Carolina. I want to welcome everybody who's joined us here this evening. I know it's late. It's 10:40 p.m. on the East Coast. I have been putting together information all weekend long. I did not come on the air yesterday because I did not have a definitive role to play in what we're going to talk about tonight. Tonight we have definitive information to give you. I would also advise everybody to take notes about what I'm saying. Over on our Facebook Messenger groups, I have mentioned some things that are very pertinent to what we're going to be talking about tonight. I'm going to give you full details of what has happened during the past 72 hours, not just here in the United States, but even over in Russia. That is our primary topic tonight. Friday, a man called Prigozhin, Prigozhin. He's a general with what they call the Wagner group, which is very much a very well-funded mercenary group out of Russia. That group has also been declared a warlord. Prigozhin himself has been turned into a brutal warlord. Okay, his apparent transformation into a brutal warlord came in the aftermath of the 2014 Russian-backed separatist movement in Donbass in eastern UKR. Prigozhin founded Wagner as a shadowy mercenary outfit that fought both in UKR and other places around the world. Russian-backed causes around the world. CNN has tracked Wagner mercenaries in Central African Republic, Sudan, Libya, Mozambique, UKR, and Syria. Over the years, they've developed a gruesome reputation and have been linked to multiple human rights abuses. After Russia took on UKR, the group was thrust to center stage. The Wagner forces were heavily involved in UKR and taking over towns. As the regular Russian army campaign was bogged down by setbacks and disorganization, Wagner fighters appeared to be the only ones that are capable of delivering tangible progress for the Russian side. Now, I'm not backing Russia at all. I'm giving you information on what has happened. During the weekend on Saturday, and I'm going to be putting up some pictures here for you all to see. The first one I'm going to put up here in just a minute. You guys just give me a second. I should have had this even done before I came on the air, and I'm sorry. I put together the pictures but forgot to organize them on the broadcast software. So if you guys will just give me a second and I'll get everything done here. But Prigozhin and Putin were in a real tussle because Prigozhin had turned and centered his activity on returning to Moscow. And at the time he was stopped. Prigozhin's troops from the Wagner group were 120 miles from Moscow. So basically what I'm telling you is he was stopped, at least for the time being. Now, I have reason to believe that this is not over at all. I have reason to believe that. I have been working literally on this all day long. And I've been working on it actually since yesterday afternoon. What we have seen, folks, is a complete shall I say, a mercenary that's turned on his captain. The first picture I want to show you is Mr. Prigozhin. He owned a series of restaurants throughout Russia. One of his restaurants there sees Putin dining there. This was in 2014. Prigozhin owns a bunch of restaurants, and you see Mr. Prigozhin serving Vladimir Putin. Mr. Prigozhin and Putin were very close friends, and he was an ally of Putin, and he was put in charge of the Wagner group, or should I say, he took control of the Wagner group. Mr. Prigozhin is a general in the Wagner group. He's seen here in the center of this photograph. He's seen here with the Russian's defense minister, or Minister of Defense, Yuri Yevkurov, yesterday, and representative from Belarus on the right-hand side. The president of Belarus is President Alexander Lukashenko, pictured here. Mr. Lukashenko became an intermediary, I can't even pronounce anything tonight, an intermediary between Russia's Putin and Mr. Lukashenko. He brokered an agreement between the group that was on their way back to Moscow. And he stopped that group from continuing. So Prigozhin was stopped only because Alexander Lukashenko from Belarus had struck a deal with the general. And so far, it has stopped what could have been a coup, and what is described as a coup. Now, I have reason to believe it's not over. What we have right now with Prigozhin allegedly stopped where he was at. Yesterday, Prigozhin and his mercenary group had taken over a Russian town on the southern part of Russia without a shot fired. Prigozhin has shown that he means business whatever he does. He was put into power by Putin. But Putin is right in the middle of a dilemma. Putin is known for his disregard for the lives of his own soldiers. Wagner's brutal and often lawless tactics are believed to have resulted in high numbers of casualties as new recruits are sent into battle with little formal training. A process that's described by retired United States Lieutenant General Mark Herting as like feeding meat to a meat grinder. Prigozhin has used social media to lobby for what he wants and often cast himself as a competent and ruthless, in contrast to the Kremlin's military establishment. In recent months, Prigozhin has created a dilemma for Putin, becoming an outspoken critic of Russia's military leaders. So, in one particularly grim video from early May, Prigozhin stood next to a pile of soldiers, Wagner fighters, who had passed away on the battlefield. And he took aim specifically at Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Chief of the Russian Armed Forces General Valery Gerasimov. Prigozhin said, quote, "The blood is still fresh," pointing to the bodies behind him. "They came here as volunteers and are dying so you can sit like fat cats in your luxury offices." After complaining for well over a month of receiving insufficient support from the Kremlin in the grueling fight for the eastern city of Bakhmut, he announced in May that his troops would withdraw. Now Prigozhin launched an all-out rebellion against the Kremlin after his increasing outrageous outbursts sparked speculation that he had been going too far. The Wagner mutiny began when Prigozhin unleashed a new tirade against the Russian military on Friday, and then he proceeded to march his troops into the Russian city of Rostov-on-Don. That is a city where Prigozhin marched in with his troops and took it over without a shot being fired. staring down a sudden and staggering escalation of internal tensions that have simmered for months, Putin called Wagner's action treason. That was on Friday night. Putin came on the air. It was broadcast internationally. And he said everything would be done to stop Prigozhin. And then it was reported that Putin got on a plane and probably went to a bunker. In his speech Friday night, Putin said, "It is a stab in the back of our country and our people." Prigozhin responded on Telegram saying that Putin was deeply mistaken. "We are patriots of our motherland. We fought and are fighting," Prigozhin said in audio messages. That's where it stood as of Friday night going into Saturday. The battle of words has continued. Nearly 3 years ago, Russian President Vladimir Putin stood by Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko in his hour of need, backing Europe's longest-running dictator as he faced a wave of street protests. Now, President Lukashenko from Belarus appears to come through for Putin, if we are to believe what the Kremlin and the Belarusian President Press Service tells us. Now, if you have not heard, or maybe you have forgotten, that about a month ago, President Putin said that he was putting nuclear warheads in Belarus, which was going to up the ante in that region. But as I said, it now appears that Lukashenko has come through for Putin, if we are to believe what the Kremlin has put out. A quick recap here. A major crisis shook the foundations of the Russian state yesterday, as forces loyal to Wagner mercenary troops and Prigozhin marched through Moscow in an abrupt reversal happened. Prigozhin called off their advance, claiming his mercenaries had come within 124 miles of Moscow, but were turning around to avoid spilling Russian blood. According to the Belarusian president's press service, the decision followed an unprecedented intervention by Lukashenko himself. The supposed deal struck with Prigozhin would see the Wagner boss leaving for Belarus. A criminal case against the mercenary boss would be dropped, and Wagner fighters would be folded into formal military structures by signing contracts with the Russian Ministry of Defense. So allegedly, all of the Wagner forces and Prigozhin got a pass. That is usually not the way Vladimir Putin has done business. Within a very short order of time, Putin has in the past gotten rid of the problems, if you know what I mean. The only bare outlines of this deal at this time, Prigozhin's whereabouts are currently unknown, and he has not commented on the supposed agreement, and the Kremlin and the Belarusian accountant Lukashenko's mediation appear to be stretch his credibility, meaning the credibility of the president of Belarus. You will probably ask, why Lukashenko? Dmitry Peskov from the Kremlin said yesterday, the fact is that Alexander Grigoryevich Lukashenko has known Prigozhin personally for a long time, for about 20 years. And it was his personal proposal which was agreed with President Putin. We are grateful to the President of Belarus for these efforts. Those efforts, Peskov claimed, managed to resolve this situation without further losses, without increasing the level of tension. Still, Belarus President Lukashenko's apparent intercession here raises even more questions than it answers. For starters, Lukashenko is clearly seen as a junior partner in the relationship with Putin. A junior partner. And Belarus depends on Russia for aid. Okay? I'm giving you the whole picture here. At the height of Lukashenko's confrontation with protesters, Putin came through with a loan of $1.6 billion. And Belarus has been a springboard for Russian military operations in UKR, something that has isolated Lukashenko further from the West. And it's triggered new sanctions on that country's economy. So what is to gain for Lukashenko appearing to be a mediator between the Wagner Group and Putin? It seems difficult to envision Prigozhin happily harvesting potatoes alongside the Belarusian leader, a former collective farm boss. And why was Putin, who until this weekend was reliable arbiter of elite disputes in Russia? Yes, Putin was a reliable arbitrator from disputes in Russia. And why wasn't Putin capable to cut the deal himself? Big questions. Delegating Lukashenko to resolve the crisis further damages Putin's own image as a man of decisive action, which he has been for 50 years. He's been in power that long. And initial details that we have, it seems, do not completely add up. And adding to that, uncertainty about other questions as well. What will actually happen to the Wagner brand? The Wagner brand has been all over Africa and has committed crimes against humanity, doing Russia's dirty work. Will Prigozhin's foot soldiers be compliant and let themselves be absorbed into the Russian military? Will they still be loyal and have loyalty to their boss? And what about Wagner forces operating elsewhere in the world, from Africa to the Middle East? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Prigozhin and his Wagner group have also been in the Middle East. Prigozhin, if and when he actually surfaces, may give us some clues. But again, I have great questions on what's going to happen to the Wagner group itself as well as Prigozhin, since Putin has in the past been a very avid dictator and doing his own work, meaning getting rid of dissenters, making them go away. So with all this going on, there's other things to discuss here. The United Nations Security Council is hosting an emergency council meeting they're going to be discussing what is going on today. The president of the UN Security Council has called for law and order in Russia. The head of the government will hear reports from the prime minister and heads of security forces about taking course measure corrections connected to the situation in Russia. An action plan, for example, should be expected to be adopted to neutralize possible negative consequences linked to the situation in Russia and in the neighboring friendly countries that impact the security of this region and the security of citizens all around, even Kazakhstan, and the economy of Kazakhstan as well. Now, Prime Minister Tokayev from the Kremlin said that the events in Russia are an internal affair of Russia and called for the resumption of law and order in Russia. But this weekend's happenings has been a mortal blow to Putin. That's according to one of our own U.S. generals. Now, we all know what's been going on. I don't think anything is any new news to anyone here except for what I've talked about. Do we really think that Prigozhin, do we really believe that Prigozhin is going to stop? Is he going to go into hiding? Is he going to go over to Belarus? Either way, Putin will hunt him down. I'm very sure of that. Now, I've watched Putin since he took over as president of Russia. Boris Yeltsin was in control before him. And Putin and Yeltsin didn't normally even get along. They didn't see eye to eye. Putin doesn't forgive traitors. Russian President Putin doesn't forgive traitors. Even though Putin has told Prigozhin to go to Belarus, according to the Kremlin. Prigozhin, the Wagner chief, remains a traitor. Now, there are many people that believe, as I do, that Putin will never forgive anyone like that, whether it be Prigozhin or any of his underlings within the Wagner group. I don't think they will cooperate with the Russian military. And I think it's going to be a real dilemma, because as long as Prigozhin is acting in the way he does and has some type of support, he's going to be a threat to Putin, regardless of where he is. Now, at this point in time, Putin himself looks really weak. Not just politically, but physically. Those of you that have paid any attention to Russian politics have seen President Putin, and he does not look good. He suffers from cancer and has been undergoing treatment for his cancer. So with all that said, he looks really weak. If I were Putin, I would be worried about the people on the streets of Russia cheering the Wagner people as they leave. Cheering the Wagner people. Why are average Russians on the street cheering people trying to carry out a coup? That means maybe, just maybe, they might like those people. They might like what the Wagner Group has done. Whatever it is, it's really bad news for Vladimir Putin. But it goes even further than that. Some of you might know, yes, Don Patokas here in the chat tonight, he says Putin is former KGB. He was. He was one of the lead agents for the Russian KGB for years. And Don Patokas says he will get him. And he might very well do that. Putin is relentless like that. But we have other fish to fry here. Don says, we're going to see who needs a casket. Yeah, that's true. I don't think it's over. But there are bigger things going on that we need to be worried about. I may have mentioned this on a previous show in the past couple weeks. If I have not mentioned it, I should have. And I believe I did mention it at one point in time. We have had United States troops and Canadian troops moving all over our two countries, fortifying our borders, north, south, east, and west to the coasts. We've seen a lot of military aircraft, Canadian and American aircraft, flying up and down the coast, flying around major cities. Fighter aircraft, even fighter aircraft buzzing where I live, within about 2,000 feet of the ground here where I live, just this week, or this past week. What's going on? I've also seen train loads of military tanks and military vehicles headed various directions. I've seen pictures of these also. What is going on? We've seen a lot of military equipment and troops moving to various places. And it's not just that. The military aircraft isn't just fighters. It's B-52 bombers. It's command and control aircraft. And at one point in time this week, and I think it's been that way most every day this week, at least 12 command and control aircraft have been airborne at any one time. I believe the United States government and the United States military is not taking this lightly. Mr. Putin weeks ago said that if any one Western ally was found to be supporting anybody in UKR, that the West would suffer atrocities from Russia in the form of weapons launched against the West. We didn't take it lightly. The United States military didn't take it lightly. The man in control in Washington did. I don't believe he's really in control. I believe he's just a figurehead that's out there being told what to say and what to do. Whispered in his ear, so to speak. Now, we may be getting ourselves into a world of hurt. It's not just our military that have been beefing up our cities, our towns, and our coasts and borders. It's reported by various groups within our media The mainstream media isn't talking about it. Not at all. But the alternative media has. If you have not already noticed, other entities besides myself have been on the air talking about preparedness. Preparedness foods. How to store food. How to get what you need to survive. How to be prepared. Now, I have done a lot of that myself. In recent weeks, I've talked a lot about it. I'm going to be the first one to talk about it. I've been watching this kind of stuff happen since I was a kid. I'm not a guy to sit back and just let stuff happen. I never have. When my parents first asked me to help out with preparedness dinners at their church, I said absolutely. I spoke at quite a few of their dinners. I've spoken at the Emergency Preparedness Fairs. I've spoken to groups literally all over the country. We've seen this happen. We've seen all sorts of things happen. And up until 4 years ago, I had not gone on the air, but I did over 4 years ago come on the air to talk about it. We have a real dilemma on our hands as citizens of this country. What do? I personally have talked about preparedness. I've talked about writing an emergency preparedness plan. And I still am talking about it. If you don't already have a preparedness plan, you're behind the 8 ball. Because what is happening could cost us our lives. What is happening could cost us our lives. Folks, we need to be aware of what we're doing and where we're at. Things are not what they seem. Things could happen very rapidly. Now, there's a group called, well, he has an internet radio show called Hal Turner. As I've stated before, Mr. Turner and other groups have been reporting heavy troop movements all over the U.S. and Canada. And the intelligence that I keep seeing and hearing for all this week and for weeks before that is that we have troops that are moving all over the United States and Canada. The coasts are being heavily fortified. Planes from the Air Force and the Navy are up, making patrols up and down the coast and all around our borders. And specifically around places that might be vulnerable in case Putin decides to do something against us. The other problem is this. With everything going on, can we trust Hal Turner? Hal Turner's been a bit out there. In my dealings and watching and listening to some of the things that Hal Turner's put out, he's a little bit out there. He's not always told the absolute truth. But what is going on, folks, is we have an out of control Russian president. And now word has come out that the United States government was responsible for what the Wagner Group did. And yes, it wouldn't surprise me that a three-letter agency was also involved, or several three-letter agencies have been involved. Everybody needs to make sure that you yourself are protecting yourselves. You need to make sure yourselves that you are prepared for whatever might happen, including earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes that are coming. This is hurricane season. There's one tropical storm right now, Brett, going through the Caribbean, heading for Central America. Another storm that can turn into a hurricane going over towards Bermuda, but may not hit Bermuda head on, but go to the northeast. But it might still take up hitting northeastern Canada, possibly at hurricane force. Everybody needs to prepare. I've been telling everybody this for a very, very long time. Linda Moses is here in the chat. Says it puzzles me that they could not find 25,000 Wagner Group and its leader. It's unbelievable. I agree. But folks, what I'm saying, yes, Prigozhin and his Wagner Group supporters, including his upper echelon military people, Putin may not let them last very long. But on the same token, with all that's going on, and Putin already's heard this, I'm sure, that the United States military or our three-letter agency may have been involved with a Wagner Group. He could come out against the U.S. at any time. He's been threatening that for weeks and if not months. I wanted to make sure that everyone that would be within the sound of my voice would hear this conversation tonight. I've given you most of the details, but I'm still calling for everybody to have a preparedness plan. I know there are people that are not even paying attention to me. My plea for a preparedness plan for everybody is probably fallen on deaf ears to a certain extent. Just like the emergency managers back in 2014 that were told by FEMA to tell their communities to have a 72-hour kit. Then a poll was sent out to all emergency managers. How many emergency managers that were told to tell the citizens to have preparedness kits, 72-hour kits, how many emergency managers actually had a 72-hour kit? The numbers aren't good. 25% of emergency managers in 2014, 9 years ago, had preparedness kits. That's a pittance. I have 2 of them. Yes, I have 2 72-hour kits. I also have about 6 months worth of food. I also have all kinds of sheltering equipment, camping equipment and such. I could survive for a very long time. How many of you could do that? How many of you could do that? I'm just putting this out tonight because I want to make sure that at least the Emergency Management Associates family and other people that hear this program have a preparedness plan, have preparedness kits, have clothing for whatever season and whatever thing might come into our purview that might slow us down or stop us. You need to have a plan. You need to have your medications. You need to have emergency medical kits. You need to have survival food. You need to check your pantry and make sure you have at least a 6-month supply of food, if not a year. If not a year, 2 years worth of food in your pantry. Prices keep going out of sight. This past week I bought gas for a very good price. The next day it climbed 16 cents a gallon, and it's still climbing. Are you guys, do you guys have gas in your vehicles sufficient if an emergency happened that you could bug out and travel a considerable distance without having to worry about fuel? What happens if you have to leave your community, your neighborhood, during an emergency? Would you run out of fuel just leaving? Would you have to stop and get gas someplace and pay exorbitant costs for gas in your community because everybody knows the same thing, that you have to bug out? And the companies are making a killing knowing that people have to have gas? What are you doing to protect yourselves and your families? That's what worries me. I've been talking about this for a very long time. I wanted to come on the air and talk about this again because I believe our lives are at stake here. All of our lives are at stake. This is Sunday. I usually only do Sunday school classes on Sunday. So my coming on right now is evidence of something really, really wrong. And I believe that everybody needs to have their ear to the ground. You need to have an emergency AM, FM weather radio. If not, you need to have your radio tuned to a news talk station. Not music, but a news talk station that will give you emergency information when it comes out. On your television should not be tuned to anything other than a television station local in your area that will give you reliable news updates when necessary. You need to be self-sustaining. Okay? You need to be self-sustaining. Physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Okay? You need to have at least a dignity of freedom. Okay? We have local issues in our communities, in our states. We have national world issues. We cannot depend on anyone else but ourselves. I'm trying to put this information out for you, for all of us. Please, folks, on your way out tonight, make sure you give a thumbs up to us if any of this matters to you and your families. Also, please share what we've told you tonight with everybody you know. Your families, your extended families, your neighbors, your friends, the people you work with in your social media contacts. Everybody needs this information. If you know people that have not subscribed to this channel, please tell them about us and ask them to come here and subscribe and listen to what we have to say. I believe what we have to say is something very important and specific to each and every one of us. This is Sunday. I told you what I believe. I bore you my testimony of our Savior Jesus Christ earlier this morning. I believe we are giving you a message that is pertinent to you and your physical survival and your spiritual survival as well. I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe in his message. And his message is one of preparedness as well. Now, folks, I'm going to end this thing here. I appreciate all of you being here tonight. I thank you for that. But again, please share this program. This message is vital. It needs to get out. I love you. I love all of you. That's why we're here. May God bless us. May God be with us this day and always. May God bless you and be with you until we meet again. We will see you, if not tomorrow night. If anything else happens here tonight or during the day tomorrow, we'll be back on the air as soon as the information becomes available and bring it to you. But until we meet again, God bless you and be with you. Have a great night, everybody. I love you very much. We will see you on the other side. Good night, everybody.